Alright, what up? This is going to be a slightly different video because I haven't really prepared for this much, but there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. So I've been doing these Cal.com calls for the last week or so. I've done like 5 or 6 of them now. And basically what I did is I offered to help anybody who wants to get into open source. And now that I've done a few of these, I realized most people kind of have the same questions or the same things that they don't understand yet. So in this video, I'm just going to talk about a couple of them, and hopefully it's going to be useful for some of you. So the first point I want to make is that you're probably ready to get into open source. Everybody I talked to kind of thought they weren't ready yet or wasn't sure if they were ready yet, but they all had quite a bit of experience with web dev and had some pretty impressive projects. And there's definitely a lot of issues, even on the projects that I'm working on, that every single one of the people I talked to definitely was at a high enough skill level to open a good PR for. So it's going to, of course, depend on what exactly you want to do or what exactly you want to help with, but I would say if you're ready for your first contract or your first job, then you're also ready to work in open source, and maybe even earlier. The second thing I want to talk about is just how to find something to do. My overall opinion on good first issues is that they're a trap with most projects. So what I do on Create T3 app and anywhere else where I'd open a good first issue is if I tag it with that, it means I'm willing to get on a call with you and pair with you to implement it. However, most projects don't do this, and so usually what ends up happening is they just label like CSS stuff and those sorts of things as good first issues, like the kind of things that these maintainers feel like they're sort of above doing, I would say. And what ends up happening is you fix one of these CSS issues or whatever it might be, and then you kind of think, okay, I've solved this, so what's next? And so all this has done is it's brought you from having 0 commits to this project and not knowing what to do to having 1 commit on this project and not knowing what to do. And really what you want to solve is the knowing what to do part, not the getting your first commit part. My main advice here would be to start small and fix problems that you have, but that's kind of vague, so maybe we can go through some of my first commits to open source projects. So this is the first PR I ever got merged, and basically I knew how to program more or less. I'd been using Python and Objective-C and a couple of other languages for a while, but I'd never really done web stuff. So I was going through the free Codecamp curriculum, and every now and then I'd run into an issue with parts of the curriculum or the sample projects or something like that. And so in this case, I tried to deploy one of the sample projects to Heroku, but Heroku uses a custom port that they inject as an environment variable, so it wasn't working because the port was hard-coded in the project. So if you look at the changelog here, all I did was, instead of listening on port 3000, I set it to listen to either the environment variable of port or 3000. And so that's not an impressive PR at all in terms of the code that's in it, but I really think that doing a bunch of these is how you get started. Here's another similar one. They had this Sudoku solver API, and you could send it a square and a number and it would tell you if that's a valid number or not, but it treated a 0 as a valid number. And so all I did was change this check, which was incorrect here with values less than 0, to check for values less than 1 instead. And that was my entire commit, 1 character. Here's a PR that I would say really got me into the open source workflow. So Free Codecamp was working on this project called Chapter, which is like a meetup.com clone. And the project lives in some Docker containers. And I was working on an M1 Mac and I couldn't get it to build on that. Now, I knew almost nothing about Docker at the time, and nobody on the team of the project had an M1 Mac to test it on, so I started doing a bit of my own research and I started compiling a couple of possible solutions and recommending one of them. So there was a bit of back and forth with the team discussing the pros and cons of each of the solutions, and once we kind of arrived at a conclusion, I made the PR, and it was literally just a 1-line change, where on any non-x86 platform, we were just emulating an x86 processor. And the last one I wanted to show was my first contribution to Create T3 app. So there was this issue open where it was crashing on Yarn 3. And so I added this check that throws up a warning when the user's running the CLI with Yarn 3, as well as adding this Yarn RC file, which was, I think, necessary because otherwise Yarn 3 was crashing before we could even throw up the warning. So yeah, what I think all of these PRs have in common is that they're kind of small and most of them fixed a problem that I was actually having. The next thing I want to talk about is finding the right project. So it's definitely legit to jump around and fix something on a project here, fix another thing on a project there. But I think where you learn the most is when you really become embedded in one specific project. And I think the most important thing here is to pick one that's still kind of small and growing so that it has a lot of low-hanging fruit that you can solve. And in solving these low-hanging fruit, you'll start becoming more comfortable and be able to work on bigger things. So if we look at the contributors, for example, for React, you'll see most of the changes are being made by a very small amount of people. So you have Dan, Andrew, Seb, and Sophie, then a couple of people who aren't really contributing anymore. But you can see once we scroll past the core team, it really starts to thin out fairly quickly. And of course, all of these contributions are still super valuable. But what I'm trying to say is that you want to become a core contributor on a project. I think that's where the biggest learning happens. And so again, for most people, I think the better choice here is going to be a younger project. So what you can do is pay attention to what's kind of new and exciting in the web dev world or whatever world you're in, but still a bit rougher on the edges. And that's probably going to be a pretty good project to join. The next point I want to make is to join the communication channels of a project that you're interested in. So for most projects, that's going to be a Discord. So just join it and start reading. And if you have any questions, go and ask them. So you can see, for example, here's the Discord for TRPC, and it has this contributing channel. And if you think there's something you might be interested in working on, you can just post here and ask any questions. And if we scroll up here, there's a lot of other stuff we can see. For example, here Alex posted a good first issue. Here someone got feedback on something they were working on. And this is actually a really important point. You don't need to have the full solution. Or here's Nick asking for feedback on a documentation PR that he made. And just getting feedback and reviews from people outside of the project can also be really helpful to the core maintainers, because it's kind of difficult to put yourself into the brain of someone who's not working on this project every day. That's all I wanted to say about communication. Just hang out in the Discord, see what people are talking about. If you're not sure if the project would be interested in something that you think you could contribute, then just ask. And yeah, I think this whole communication aspect is quite underrated, and I'm surprised by how many people don't do it. Because it can help you become a friendly face in the community, it can help you find stuff to work on, it can help you get feedback on the stuff you're working on or help with the stuff that you're working on. And I think if you hang out in the community of a project that you're interested in long enough, then you'll definitely find something to contribute. The next topic is a really simple one. You don't need to understand the whole code base in order to be able to contribute something. So for example, with TRPC, I don't really understand all of the library level TypeScript that's going on there. And even with a simpler project like Create T3 app, there's quite a few bits in the code base that I probably could learn if I would put the time into it, but I just haven't done it. For example, some of the deployment stuff. But just in general, with bigger code bases, I think it makes sense to treat everything except for the bit that you need in order to make your change as basically a black box, because otherwise you'll just be reading the code base forever and not getting anything done. The next topic is how to contribute. And basically what you need to keep in mind here is that most of these projects are being run by people in their free time. Most maintainers aren't doing this for a living. Usually we have jobs or go to university or whatever, and then we might have families and so on. So we really only have a fairly small amount of time each day to work on this stuff. So the best thing you can do if you want to get your PRs merged is to make it easy for the maintainers to read them and to merge them. And if you're wondering how to do that, most projects are going to have either a contributing.md file, which is going to have in it some contribution guidelines, or alternatively, they might just be in the main README. It might also be a good idea to read the pull request template in advance, and the way you can find that is you go into the GitHub folder, and then in here there's a pull request template.md. And this is going to show you what you need in order to have a valid pull request for that project. And then finally, one more really good thing you can do here is to go into pull requests, look at the closed ones, and just read through a few that have been merged. So for example, if I go into this one here, you can see this person has filled out the checklist, added a changelog, and added some screenshots. And this makes it really easy for me to review that PR and to know what's going on. And so altogether, this PR probably doesn't take me more than a minute or two to review. The other thing that's really helpful is for you to keep your PRs small, because what that means is that it's easier to review, easier to test, easier to merge. And if you open 3 PRs that each have different changes, then for example, if we disagree about one of them, we can just merge the other 2 and not have the disagreements about the third PR block those 2. And another thing that's super important is that if people ask questions on your PR or request changes, this doesn't mean they're criticizing you or your work or anything like that. This is just the process of open source. So if your PR has a problem in it and it gets flagged, you might feel like you want to sink into the ground, but this is just the system working as intended, and everybody's still going to be happy about your PR and happy to merge it and happy to read and merge future ones. So don't let it get to you. Nobody here holds a grudge. One other thing I want to talk about is non-code contributions. And maybe your goal is to contribute code, but these non-code contributions can be a great path to that. A big one here is support. So If you ever had a problem with a library or a project and it took you a while to figure it out, but then you finally got it, then chances are somebody else is also going to have that problem down the line. So what you can do is hang out in Discord or Stack Overflow or whatever it might be. And if somebody has a question about an aspect of the project that you're familiar with, then you can be the person who answers that question. And this is really important actually, because the types of questions you get and what good answers to them are often plays a big role in defining how the API should look in the future. Another thing you can do that's super helpful to the team of any project is if you run into an issue and you don't know how to solve it, open a really good issue for it. And what that means is a description of the bug, a link to a reproduction repo or some sample code. And for example, you can even add a video of how to reproduce the issue. One of the most frustrating things is working on trying to fix something, but not being able to reproduce it. So you're really helping out a lot here if you open a very clear issue. And it's also a really important aspect of communication. Docs are kind of a similar deal. So writing good documentation is quite difficult and really requires a good understanding of that part of the project. So I find that often when I write docs, I learn a lot about the project and actually become more capable also as a code contributor. It's also enormously neglected for a lot of projects, so it can be a really good way to get into a project. The last one here is code review, and what a lot of people don't realize is that for most projects, anyone's allowed to do code review. And this isn't like a bug in GitHub that the projects forget to close, but this is actually on purpose. So especially if you're familiar with a part of the code base or a type of issue, and not necessarily even on the library code level, but just on the level of somebody using that library, it can be really helpful to the team if you review code that's related to that. The other thing here, and this kind of applies to everything I've said so far, so code contributions, docs, code review, and so on, is that you don't need anyone's permission. You just need to start doing it. So like nobody's going to send you a letter in the mail once you're ready to contribute to a project or anything like that. You just need to go out on your own and start doing it. And of course, a lot of projects, including the ones that I work on, try to make it more accessible and more welcoming to new contributors. But at the end of the day, the initiative has to come from you. And if you don't know whether or not you're ready, just give it a go and find out. Okay, and the last topic I want to talk about is how to join a core team. So this is going to be different for every project, but I think what every project has in common here is that the main key to getting in is to just start contributing to the project. So whether that's code or documentation or support or anything else, and just keep doing that in a sustained way over a longer period of time, while also hanging out in Discord and communicating with the team. And if you keep this up for a couple of months, then your chances are pretty good of being asked to join a core team. In some projects, there's basically no process to this, so just somebody invites you to a Discord channel or something like that, and then suddenly you're on the team. In other projects, it might be a bit more complicated than that, with sort of a process where all of the maintainers have to agree to let you in or something like that. But the main thing is to just steadily contribute little by little over a sustained period of time. So that's all I had. Thanks a lot for watching. If you found this helpful, then please like and subscribe. It's going to help me a lot. And also there's going to be a recommended video in the corner, so check that out if you're interested. And I'll see you in the next one.